The artists that really started the very public and prominent and international role for Amnesty were the comedians, the Monty Python crew in the 1970s, where John Cleese and co. started the very successful Secret Policeman's Ball.
I wanted to ask about the title for the Amnesty Gala. It's called The Secret Policeman's Ball. Is it your title?
No, I'm glad you asked me that. No, it's Martin Lewis's title. I can pin that one on him, but I thought it was quite funny.
Martin Lewis was the pioneer to get musicians involved in Amnesty in the 1970s, and he first persuaded Pete Townshend.
My friend Martin Lewis had invited me in a sense, to kind of lighten the proceedings, to break up the comedy.
I thought it was a fantastic show. And then I got a call from Martin Lewis, who had organised the first one, would I come on? And so, because I was a fan of the first show, I said, sure.
Right after I became director of Amnesty, Martin Lewis, who had produced The Secret Policeman's Ball, got me to see the film. I just thought it was absolutely brilliant. So I wanted to continue talking to Martin, hunting for that same secret that the British section had found with their talent.
He's a producer, marketing strategist, and Huffington Post contributor, here to tell us about all things British, Mr. Martin Lewis.
Many years ago in Britain, you were like 12 years old when you got involved with the Secret Policeman's Ball.
John Cleese wanted to help Amnesty International, the human rights organisation, so he offered to put on a show and get a few pals. But of course his pals were Monty Python, Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, and all the greats of British comedy. And that's how it started. The Pythons have been so supportive, and one of the things I've found that's amazing is that younger performers, they all look up to Monty Python.
Yes.
And they get... Yes. I mean, I once had a conversation with Mike Myers, and he turned out to be a huge Monty Python fan.
Right. You also expanded it to music.
I did. Well, I mean, as you mentioned, I was rather young at the time.
Young, yes.
But I mentioned to John Cleese, look, it's great we've got all these great comedians, but could we have a little bit of music? And John Cleese said to me, look, I'm not really...
Get the Beatles.
Well,
no, he was a classical guy.
Yeah, a classical music guy. He said, I'm not really into this pop music with all these guys with their banjos. But if you want to get along a couple of the musicians, you could do so.
So the shows were, the first show was planned, and I'm sure it was thought of as a one-time event.
It then broadened out because we started adding music, and I invited Pete Townshend, and I can't claim that we invented Unplugged wittingly. We just did it because there were comedy sketches and we needed a little bit of acoustic music between the sketches. But that did lead to other performers such as Sting and Bono and Peter Gabriel and Bob Geldof and Eric Clapton. They saw what Townshend did and they caught the bug and they wanted to contribute as well. Amnesty was one of the first organisations that galvanised these performers and showed them that they could do it, not just for Amnesty, but for others. I worked with John Cleese on a thing called the Secret Policeman's Ball. And they were benefit shows for Amnesty International. And no one wanted to help out on them because it was a charity show, so you wouldn't get paid. I didn't care. I wanted to work with Monty Python. Well, you know, the thing is, if you work with great people like the Pythons and Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, you don't think of yourself as funny.
Right.
But maybe a little bit of it rubbed off on me, and, you know, so I do it. But I don't call myself a comedian. I'm a humorist.
A humorist. Okay, now describe the difference.
A humorist is like a comedian, but not quite as funny.
What exactly do you do?
Not much. I do a lot of writing. I used to write for Time magazine, now for Huffington Post.
I read your article in the Huffington Post about the Murdoch thing. It was the best thing I have read yet on that subject.
What he would do was he appealed to the British equivalent of Archie Bunker. And to those he basically said, hey, here's a nice pair of knockers. Oh, union's bad. Here's a pair of tits. Gay people are perverts. And if you do that for 10 years... If you do that for 10 years, eventually it drips in. And then the result was Margaret Thatcher.
So I'm grateful for Amnesty and, you know, to Martin Lewis for getting me on board with Amnesty, but I feel very proud of my association with it.